Hello, everyone, and welcome into episode 20 of Conversations with Chris and Cameron. Today, we are joined by a true Kentucky basketball legend, Kyle Macy, from leading the Wildcats to the 1978 National Championship to his 7-year NBA career coaching, broadcasting, and now co-authoring from the Raptors of Rupp. Kyle has done it all. We'll dive into his journey, his new book, and what Kentucky basketball means to him. How are you doing, Kyle?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Oh,
Yeah, appreciate you joining.
we appreciate you joining. So let's just start out. You, of course, you're from Indiana and everything. How was that like growing up? With your home state, your city.
Yeah, my father was a basketball coach, so I've always been around the game. When I was born, he was a high school coach. When I was 3, we moved to Fort Wayne. He became an NAIA coach at Indiana Tech and was there until I turned 15, and I was going into my sophomore year. And he decided that, he didn't get to see me play much, whether it was recruiting or practicing his teams and games and those type of things. So the job at Peru was open, which both of my parents were from that same county. So they were familiar with it. I had a grandparents that lived there actually in Peru. And so he took the high school job there so he could spend more time and coach me as well. And so Indiana, as you know, high school basketball is pretty revered,
Yeah.
top to bottom. And so it was a lot of fun. But I played other sports growing up as well. I played tennis, I played baseball as well as basketball. And I mean, there were times I remember, even in high school, where I'd play in the summer a tennis tournament during the day, might have a baseball game that night. And then the nice thing about having a father as a coach, he had keys to the gym too. So we'd go back at least for an hour, shoot around, play maybe one-on-one or, do some fundamental things. So I was always around sports and real active.
Yeah, it sounds like you were a busy kid for sure.
Yeah, I like playing, I like competing. So yeah, it was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good stuff. So you mentioned the state of Indiana for high school basketball. Still, I'm currently young into my coaching career, but going over to Indiana and playing summer league games, it always just blows my mind how serious it is. Like you said, it's very revered. You won Mr. Basketball, and if you look through the list of Mr. Basketballs over the years, it's a very, very prestigious award to win Mr. Basketball. So what did it mean to be? We talked about you just growing up there and playing for your dad and all that, but like, what was it like to be actually named Mr. Basketball, and what was that moment like being named that?
Oh yeah, it's a great honor, and it's something you take with you the rest of your life. But I think I didn't look at it so much as an individual award because I realized that my teammates had to make some sacrifices, whether it's making an extra pass, and which would help my scoring average increase, which always voters like to look at. But our team, we had a good team that year too. I think we only lost maybe 4 games. And so we were real competitive, but unfortunately, we won our sectional, went through the Marion Regional, and that was the first of their 2 back-to-back state championships. So we didn't make it to the Final Four, which would have been nice to. But still, I mean, it's obviously quite an honor. And again, but it wasn't just me; it was everybody, working for the team. And the thing about that, I mean, if your team has success, and I think there's one thing that the one and done kind of overlooked all those years. If your team has success, you're going to get individual honors. And so, everybody focused on the team being the best we could. And then those things come along. I mean, I'm the perfect example of that in college in that we won the championship in 78. I was a sophomore, so a lot of people saw me play. 79, they started back the SEC tournament, and I was fortunate, had a real good tournament, a lot of pro scouts there. And so I was drafted that summer then before my senior year. Back then, you didn't have to declare if your class had graduated, you were eligible. So, our team had a lot of success. Therefore, players were noticed.
Mhm. Understood. And I know you said previously that you played multiple sports in high school. What made you decide to actually play basketball, and when did you realize that, that could change your life?
I never played just to get a scholarship or never played to be a professional. I played because I love to play. Um, I was okay. I mean, I was pretty good at tennis. I think I picked basketball because that's really the main sport that I grew up playing. My father being a basketball coach, although at a small school, he did a lot of different things from track coach, tennis coach, baseball some years. And so he was kind of ahead of his time. He also taught PE then in high school when we moved back to Peru, and he was teaching pickleball 50 years ago, which is unheard of, and field hockey, lacrosse, those type of games. But I always felt like I was better at basketball. There was a couple schools that talked to me about possibly playing both. But I think, when you get that age, you want to kind of zero in on one thing. And I never really thought much about being drafted. I mean, I wanted to be the best player I could. And I tell you how I found out. It wasn't like I was flown to New York and they had the big ceremony there in Madison Square Garden, televised, all that. I was in Colorado Springs with the Pan American team in '79. We had practiced in Bloomington for a month, flew to Colorado Springs to get all the gear and everything before we were going to Puerto Rico to play the games. And it was nighttime. The hall phone rang, and somebody answered and said, "Hey, Macy, the phone's for you." So I went down there and hello, and they said, "Yeah, this is." I think it was maybe Fitzmaurice from the Herald Leader at the time, and he says, "What do you think about being drafted 22nd by the Phoenix Suns?" I'm like, "Yeah, what are you talking about?" So I had no idea. I was just playing because I love to play.
Yeah, I hear you completely.
Yeah, so you mentioned you played tennis, played baseball, played basketball. Was there any athlete that you had like growing up in one of those sports that kind of shined more than the other that you kind of looked up to that you would kind of want to be like at that age?
Yeah, in basketball, when I was maybe 3 through 6, maybe 7, I had my own uniform. In fact, I can show it to you. I can't see where I'm pointing, but you might be able to see it over there, the Tech #1.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so I was the team mascot. I'd lead them out for layup line, and halftime they'd go in for their talk, and I'd stay out and shoot and dribble and do all kind of things. Thought I was really king of the world. But those were the players that I really looked up to and imitated. The ones that maybe would spend time after a practice and play a game of horse with me, or whatever. I'd imitate the moves they did during the game. When I was that young, I kept my own scorebook, not the official one, but and knew every player on the team number and their stats by the end of the game, and just a big fan.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And I don't know if you keep up with about high school basketball recruiting at all, but UK is of course going after the #1 overall recruit, Tyron Stokes, and he's from Louisville, but he's currently in California playing high school sports. What do you think about him? Picking up football for his senior year. For his last year, he's like, "This is my last year." Being a kid, and he's like, "I want to try out football, just to play with my teammates officially."
Yeah, it's I guess a little unusual. A lot of times you'll have an athlete from a different sport come to basketball just because they're so athletic. But to go to a sport where there's physical contact, it's always kind of interesting the first time they get hit really hard, their bell rung, I guess, as they say, to see how they do react.
Mhm.
I actually ran cross country in junior high just to get ready for basketball season. And my ninth grade year, still in junior high at that time, the quarterback, who was my best friend, guard all through grade school, middle school, whatever, talked me into coming out for football. And he was a quarterback. He said, "Well, I'll move over to wide receiver because I know you can throw the ball." And so I was ready to go talk to the coach. And I never found out before my father passed, but to this day, I think he probably got with the coach ahead of time because coach came up with the lame rule that you couldn't quit one sport to play another. And I think, I wasn't real big and strong. And so my father, I think, was afraid I might break my arm or something and not be able to play basketball. So he got with that coach and they came up with that excuse. So I never played football, but
Yeah.
it's completely different. It takes a while, the muscles too, from being real tight and everything to basketball where you want them long and the endurance type strength.
Yeah, and everybody's been talking about it this week because like he hasn't even played a game. He just started to practice yesterday, so everybody's been fascinated about that.
Yeah, it's certainly
There's a lot
wild
of
to
good
kind of just
athletes,
pick
and
it up.
you see some players don't even play in college. I know I was coaching a team that went to China, like an all-star team, the Sports Reach, Robbie Spear put together. And one of the players, I think, was from Mississippi, big power forward, had never played football and made the scout team for the Cowboys coming out of college. Didn't make it as a basketball player, but he, real good hands, real athletic, and good size and strength. And I think he eventually worked his way onto the main team, but the first year, I mean, that's pretty impressive. He never had played. And all of a sudden,
Yeah,
he's real good, on a scout team even.
that is impressive.
That is crazy. So I do want to kind of take this back a little bit. So when I was growing up, I always just wanted, there was something that was a little pet peeve of mine that I wanted to get my free throw routine when I was about 6, and I wanted to have that for my life. It ended up being something a little different, but my papa originally and my dad both mentioned, why don't you just reach down and grab the socks a little bit? So I was like, what are they talking about? Like, what is this freeze? And then as I got older, I learned who Kyle Macy is, who the absolute icon that you are, and your free throw routine, and it worked to perfection. But going back to the free throw routine, how did you like come up with that? Because I think I read that it was more to relax and like remind yourself to bend your knees instead of just like wiping off sweat. But how did that come about? Like, how did you come up with that routine?
Yeah, I think it goes back to those sessions my father and I had because he really taught me how to play all the fundamentals and those type of things. At the sessions we had, and when I was at a young age, he said, if you want to be good at free throws, you got to develop your routine. I can't tell you what that routine is, but from your practice, do the same thing every time. And then what happens, the reason I went to my socks, yes, it did dry off my hands a little bit because at that time you wore two socks. Now you can't tell if they've even got socks on. They're so low inside their shoe. But it helped dry off the top layer. But then also it brought my focus in. And so now I kind of, in my mind, am just going through the routine, the visualization with the end result of seeing the ball go in the basket. So that's kind of where that started. And then from the practice and the success you have of seeing the ball go in the basket, then you gain that confidence. So when it comes late game situations, you're the one that wants to get fouls because you know you can help the team the most by making those free throws.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean it's a combination of a bunch of different stuff, but it started at a young age. And I can remember even grade school, sixth grade, our coach there used to have everybody shoot 10 free throws at the end of practice, keep track, see who makes the most. And again, being competitive, I always wanted to make the most of that. So really focused in and tried to make every one.
Yeah, I went to a Jody Meeks camp back whenever I was probably in middle school, but he came back to Lexington and he taught me how to shoot free throws, and that's been my routine ever since.
Yeah, I mean it's no matter what it is. I mean you don't have to wipe your hands on your socks, but do the same thing over and over. It's funny though because of that. Now, if I go play golf or tennis or whatever, somebody I don't know but remembers when I played basketball, they'll ask me, do you wipe your hands on your socks before you putt? And so, which I guess I should. The way I play golf, I should develop a routine. But
Yeah, and now we're going to your Kentucky days. Beyond winning the title, what was the hardest personal challenge you faced while at Kentucky?
Sitting out, when I transferred, there were consequences when you transferred. Nowadays, you can go anywhere you want and about any time, but you had to sit out a year. And so, having gone from age basically three, or even when I was in diapers, having a goal down our basement that my parents would hold me up by my diapers and let me drop it in the basket. Again, basketball family, to not being able to play. Fortunately, I could practice every day and be with the team there. I just couldn't travel or play in the games. So it was the toughest thing, but in hindsight, looking back, it was probably the best thing for me because Larry Johnson was the starting guard on that team the year I sat out, and I got to go against him every day in practice. About 6'3", strong, fast as could be, great defender. And so it really challenged me every day. Plus, I had that extra year. I think I transferred down there. I was 155, 160 soaking wet. Never been in the weight room. And so a year just maturity, getting in the weight room, lifting, and then also being able to practice against the guys that I would be playing with the following year. You could see what they like to do and where on the floor and like to get the ball. So I really got to know them, and it helped my transition become a lot smoother. I mean, I couldn't have sat down and written a script any better that when I became eligible, and then we win a national championship. So I was real fortunate, and to this day, appreciate the fans accepting me the way they did, and the teammates allowing me to step right into that starting role.
Mhm.
Yeah, so speaking a little bit on the 1979-1980 season, you set the school record. It still is standing to this day, 91.2% from the free throw line. Do you ever catch yourself like during games kind of maybe it's a little boastful or a little like just being lifting up yourself a little bit. You see them pop up the graphic and somebody's got a really good percentage and you're like, "Well, do I want to have this record broken now or do I kind of want to keep this legacy going?"
No, I mean I follow it just because I'm a fan. I know Travis Ford's right up there. Jody had a high percentage. I don't even know if I'm on top of them. I may be when you get deep into percentage. I don't even know, but I know um, I feel comfortable that every time I stepped the line, I did the best I could try to make it. I will tell you one story though. Later on, when I was in the pros, I think it was my rookie year. You had to have so many attempts to qualify for the free throw percentage championship, and I needed one more attempt. And it was like the last game of the year. We'd already made the playoffs, so the game really didn't mean a lot. We had our seed set and knew who we were going to be playing against. And so Dennis Johnson, Walter Davis were starting, but I played every game as a sub. So I came in and the game we were ahead, and I got in late, and so I was I needed one more attempt to qualify, and so I was jumping into everybody trying to get a foul drawn just so I could get that free throw to qualify. As it turned out, didn't get the call and didn't win it that year. But then, fortunately, 2 other years I did qualify and won the percentage championship. So
That's great to
that's really about the only time I've ever looked at stats and made an attempt during a game. But it's funny. Players will tell you it's harder when you know what you, like let's say Jack Givens when he had 41, he came out of the game and the coach thought he was, they were done. But one of the assistants said Jack's got 41, he's three short of the record, Bill Walton. And so they put him back in, told everybody on the team, try to get Jack the ball. We're trying to get him this record. And so, Jack will tell you, it's, I don't know, your focus, it's something different. And he didn't, I don't think he made a shot there at the end. Um, or if he hadn't come out and not known, he probably would have broken that record easily, but he's three short. So,
Yeah, everybody wants to break that record when they are so close, but sometimes it doesn't happen. But now we're going to continue to talk about, your Kentucky basketball days. Who was the best practice players that fans maybe didn't fully appreciate on game nights that you played?
with,
Yeah, played with.
you know, I got to give a lot of credit to the walk-ons. They weren't the most talented, weren't the biggest, strongest, fastest, but they showed up every day. They worked their tail off. Preseason conditioning, some of the guys that played all the minutes, they loved them on one end, but despised them on the other because they could go out and just run forever. And you're like, oh man, making us look bad. But to their credit, I mean, they showed up and worked hard and challenged the starters every day in practice. In fact, I just talked to one of them, Steve Williams, the other day. He's living down in Florida now. And he recalled an instance where the year I sat out, it was Steve, Brad Lawless, who here's locally around Lexington, Trip Ramsey, who's Frank Ramsey's son, was a grad assistant manager, I think, that year, and Jim Andrews, who played at Kentucky, but he was finishing up his degree, so he was helping out. And that was our scout team. And so we, at times, scrimmage with the starters. And Steve recalled a scrimmage where we actually beat him in a game, a pickup game there at practice. And he thought the starters would be mad because he made a bunch of I'd penetrate off of Jim's pick and he'd roll or Steve would spot up in the corner and have wide open looks. And he got hot and made 3 or 4 in a row. And so he thought the stars would be mad when they came in the locker room. And he said to his surprise, they all came in and said, "Hey, great shooting, Steve. Nice job. Way to make us better." Or whatever. And they went out the next night and I think beat a team by 45.
Wow,
So yeah, it was great.
that's insane.
But yeah, I mean, Truman Claytor, I think sometimes is underrated because his defensive effort, but he was a great shooter when he got hot as well. And it's funny because when I was being recruited, it came down to Kentucky and Purdue is about an hour from where I went to high school. I wasn't sure where I was going to go. I was real late deciding. I do know that. Unlike today, you didn't decide when you were seventh grade, eighth grade, whatever. So I told my father that I said, I don't want to really talk about or worry about where I'm going to college until after I finish playing so I can focus all on the playing. And so I didn't really even look at it till our last game was over. My dad loved it because he's a coach. He loved to talk to all the coaches around the country and do that all night long if they wanted to. But it came down basically, it was into May, which is really late.
Yeah.
And Coach Hall finally said, we got to know. We want to sign one more guard. If you're ready to commit, we want you. If not, we've got to get another guard. So we're going to go on. And I still wasn't ready. So I said, "Oh, yeah, well, do what you got to do because I understand." So it turned out to be Truman. They had seen him in an all-star game, and that's who they signed, who later on I'd played with for 2 years at UK. So it worked out great.
Yeah, it worked out perfectly.
Yeah.
That's a crazy story. That's awesome how it ended up coming full circle too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you mentioned Goose's 41-point game. I got to ask about it. Was that the best game that you ever witnessed, like in person, or is there another one that comes to mind?
Probably, well, that was obviously a really good game. We kind of stopped doing what we were doing, trying to do offensively, and just tried to find him against their zone. And fortunately for us, they never made an adjustment. Stayed in that zone, and we just kept picking it apart and finding Jack. That turned into our offense. Find Jack. Another game, a lot of people talk about at the time the Kingdome out in Seattle. The background was so bad. Everybody said for shooting. And I was with the Suns, Walter Davis. It was my second year I was starting. DJ had been traded to Boston, so I moved into the starting spot. And he missed his first shot and made his next 17 in a row. And they weren't layups. I mean, he was a wing player, really explosive and pull-up jumper. And so that kind of blew that theory apart about bad background, can't make it, and a big thing. So that was a great game. And then a game that I was a part of and pretty proud of when I was with Chicago later on, Michael Jordan was in his second year and we qualified for the playoffs. He didn't play most of the season because he had that injury, but he
Yeah.
came back for the playoffs. We played Boston in the first round. The first series was at the old Garden. And so we were up there playing, and it was great atmosphere. And Michael and I combined for 70 points, even though we lost in double overtime. So I like to tell that story. Michael had 63 and I had 7, but it was a pretty impressive game on his part.
That's awesome.
Yeah, everybody I remember, like I think Larry Bird said it like after the game that he was like Jesus or whatever. I forgot the exact quote, but
Yeah.
yeah, Michael Jordan was definitely insane coming back from his injury and everything.
So I do have a question, like real quick, because it's kind of a hot topic. It feels like ESPN once a week has this debate. Do you think Michael Jordan is the GOAT of basketball, or do you think it's somebody else?
It's I don't think you can pick one. He was really good, but if you look at early in his career, he wasn't because he didn't trust his teammates. I mean, you look at that game, there are times in the double overtime where he had teammates wide open and he tried to force shots and missed them and we ended up losing. But that's one game. Obviously, he's going to be in your top 5 or 6, and there's arguments for everybody. Uh, During his time that he was in the league, obviously, he was probably the best player. It's hard to count against Wilt Chamberlain, his physical talents, Bill Russell, Jerry West. I mean, you can go on and on. Magic, Bird. And how do you measure that? Is it their stats? Is it their championships, which sometimes is because you got other players with you? Um, is it their physical talents? LeBron's been around for a long time. His numbers are impressive, but I don't know. I just know it's a great league, and as a player myself that wasn't overly blessed with a lot of natural talent, I had to be ready to play and did everything I could to prepare to be ready to play against some of the greatest athletes of any sport. So,
And LeBron is going into his 23rd season. And just speaking about your 70 points, I think you said with Michael Jordan and you going back to Kobe Bryant and Kwame Brown, they combined for 84 points together with Kobe scoring 81 and Kwame with 3.
yeah, it's and you could say it with Jack in the championship game, we combined for 50. I had 9, he had 41.
Yeah. And talking more about college, what was the most intimidating road environment you played in while in college?
Um, we never played exceptionally well down in Knoxville because that was the big rival back then in the old tartan floor. Um, and the fans on both sides hated each other. I know when I came down for my unofficial visit, a game was in Memorial Coliseum. It just happened to be play Ernie and Bernie. And so my dad and I went to the game, got a ticket, and we were up pretty high. And so at halftime, they went out through the tunnels on the side at the time. And I remember the fans just throwing oranges like crazy down at them as they walked out the tunnel. I kind of turned to my dad and said, they take basketball pretty serious here, don't they? So that was a tough. I always liked playing at Florida because it was kind of a high school gym. The crowd was right on top of you, but it didn't hold a lot of people. And it was always warm. I always liked a hot gym in high school. Our fans knew that even if there was couple feet of snow on the ground, wear your heavy coat, but wear a t-shirt under it because when you get in the gym, you're taking that coat off and it's going to be hot.
Yeah.
So I always had some pretty good games down there. LSU was fun, just the rivalry, and I was fortunate had hit a couple big shots, one to win a regular season championship and those type of things. But you know, Ole Miss, would be coming off that swing at LSU where we maybe had a challenge, didn't play well, and coach would be a little tight and make some substitutions every time somebody made a mistake. So it's just a lot of great memories.
Mhm. Understood.
Yeah, so your 1978 team is like one that has obviously gone down in history. Where would you rank that among all Kentucky great teams of all time?
Well, you know, comparing, it's hard to say the 48, 49 team, back-to-back championships and Olympic gold in between. That's a pretty good resume. Obviously, you're going to compare and think your team is the best to ever play there. For us, we didn't get the publicity and notoriety probably that we should have just because there wasn't the social media or the media like there is now. ESPN started the year after because, we beat Magic and the team that won it the following year at Dayton in the Mideast Regionals. and we beat an Arkansas team with the triplets that were really good with Moncrief, Delph, and Brewer, and then beat a Duke team that had all the freshmen and Jim Spanarkel, the point guard. So it was a real good team, and we pretty much handled those. We were versatile. We could play physical inside. We had a lot of really good shooters outside. Defensively, we were probably underrated, but with the 1-3-1, man to man, we could change it up and change tempo. So, being on that team, obviously, I'm biased. I think we were the best team, but there's obviously been a lot of great teams that have played before me and well after me as well. So.
I still think that 2014-2015 team, even though they didn't win all the loss to Wisconsin going 38-1, just seeing that, as a young kid, I always thought that was like the best team. Of course, I
Yeah,
went,
and that's the thing, because that's the team you grew up watching and whatever. So I think again, it goes back the GOAT individual. It's probably who you remember watching play and
Mhm.
how you rate that, how you evaluate that. So, but I'm just proud to be on one of the championship teams that played here.
Yeah. And speaking of social media earlier, now, media, they ask NBA players or professional athletes, what was for you your welcome to the NBA moment, whether it might have been like you getting dunked on or, maybe getting crossed, like what was your welcome to the NBA moment if you had one?
I remember it was exhibition season. I was with Phoenix as a rookie, gone through camp and everything, and we had one of the exhibition games up in Flagstaff. And I came in off the bench, and I think it must have been Philadelphia because I lined up next to Julius Irving and George McGinnis. And, George being from Indianapolis, I knew him as a young kid. And Dr. J, obviously, you knew all the lore of his play from the ABA to the NBA. And so I'm kind of looking around, just kind of pinch myself. Okay, you can't be looking, you got to play. Pinch yourself and go on, play the game. Don't be caught up in just oohing and ahhing and all these players you're standing around. So for me, that was kind of the moment I realized, hey, this is a job now. You play basketball. So later on, with Artis Gilmore, who I'd watched ABA, because I probably watched more Indiana Pacer games when I was growing up. It was only an hour from Peru, and go down and watch some games, and they were winning championships, whether it was against the Colonels or Utah and those teams as well. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I looked up an interview where you had talked about Coach Hall a little bit, where you had played for him, worked with him a little bit after, and you had mentioned that like until you had got done playing for him, you didn't know he could smile. So is there like one story that kind of stands out that you could share for us, just about Coach Hall in general?
Well, I mean, one of the things that I loved playing for him was because I left Purdue because there wasn't much discipline on the team. The coach kind of let players do whatever they wanted to do. We had a lot of talent, but unless somebody's going to take charge and give them direction, they were never going to achieve, their ultimate. And so coming down here, yeah, coach was serious. I mean, and I think a lot of it has to do because he played at Kentucky before he transferred to Swanee, and he understood the fan base, how important it is to the fans, and also stepping in after Coach Rupp, he didn't want to let that legacy down and be a coach that had a losing record after Coach Rupp had done so well for so long. And so that's why he was so serious. And I think everything was focused on making sure that tradition was continued. And yeah, I mean, even when I think I told this the other day, when I decided to transfer, I called Kentucky the very first call because, they were down to my last two. I never really told them no. And so I called Coach Hall, set up a meeting, went to his house, and the meeting lasted about an hour, although it seemed like about three to me because the whole time, the year before, he had been recruiting me nonstop, trying to get me to say yes to come to Kentucky. And now I'm recruiting him nonstop, trying to get him to say yes, I can come to Kentucky. So the table had reversed. And up until the last few minutes, he never gave any indication that he was even interested. He was just kind of sitting there listening. And then finally, the last 3 minutes, I guess I'd run out and I stopped talking. And he said, "Well, I guess we can give it a try." So from then on, I said, "Oh, thank goodness." So, got to work right away trying to. I moved down here in the summer before and hit the weight room and all those type of things. But yeah, then afterwards, I worked for him for a few years when he was at Central Bank in the correspondent banking department. And all of a sudden, you find out he's a great storyteller, great joke teller, loves a good joke, and pranks as well, which we never saw. I mean, it was always stoic face, never cracked a smile or laughed or anything. But then, he develops this coaching show when he retires with Denny Crum, and they're telling fishing stories and all kind of stuff. So it was I think to every player, when you're playing for him, you may not like him the best, but at the same time, you appreciate what he's doing. He's trying to make you the best player by pushing you each and every day to get better.
Mhm.
And then afterwards, you see a different side of him, and it's like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So I kind of had different relationships with him,
Mhm.
from being recruited to recruiting myself to playing for him to then working with him, and even after I left and went into coaching, and just the relationship we always had.
Yeah, and speaking of relationships and everything, I remember like the one big thing was whenever Mark Pope got hired last year, everybody was talking about how, Rick Pitino coached him and everything, and how he was like as a coach with Rick Pitino, and basically what Mark Pope was going to transfer from what he learned, under Rick Pitino to the team. And everybody always talks about, how everybody has to pass, their speed test and making sure that happens and everything. And I just find that funny because of, how you just mentioned Joe B. Hall and you with
Yeah.
his relationship with him.
And it's funny because Monday Tony Delk hosted a charity for his foundation in Louisville, where it was the Kentucky former players playing golf against the Louisville former players, and then three other sponsors or supporters or would buy a piece of their foursome. And so it was a lot of fun because beforehand, sitting and eating and talking, and or after you played, just sitting around. And I enjoyed, because I was doing radio for 4 years when I stopped playing professionally, came back here. And so the Patino team, Tubby Smith, that transition, I was kind of involved in all that. And to hear the players that played, like Darren Feldhouse, talk about some of the stuff that he went through, and then the guys that played later on, how they thought it was so tough. And Darren's like, you have no idea some of the stuff that they did, because Coach Patino obviously pushed that first group because he didn't think they had much talent. So he wanted to make sure they were in the best shape ever, from bringing out trash cans to because somebody was going to puke at practice to whatever. So it's pretty funny. And that's one of the things about this book that I'm touring around the state with, is for the fans to get some of those stories firsthand from the players. It's always fun to hear.
Yeah, and we'll definitely talk about your book very soon. We've got a few more questions to ask you, but we definitely appreciate your time so far.
Sure. Yeah. Always like to talk Kentucky basketball.
Hey, you can never go wrong with that, right?
That's right.
Oh yeah. So I do want to bring this up. My aunt Ton. As soon as we were able to get this kind of worked out, I called her immediately. Biggest Kyle Macy fan I know. So I went to her and I said, "I need a question from you." And immediately she hit me with, "If there was a 3-point line while you were in college, how many points do you think you would have had, or how many more points do you think you would have had in your career?"
Oh, yeah, I'd have had a few more. We ran the old 6-8-10 offense, and on 10, you'd hit it, the wing, get it, and throw it to the middle and get it back at the top of the key, and make shots from there or in a corner, whatever. So, but again, the game was different. The first look was always inside. And so nowadays, I would love to play, if I was young again, to get a high pick and come off that pick every time down the floor, because you're either getting a jump shot if the big man is slow getting out, or you're going by him, getting to the rim. And if they come off the wing to help, then you're kicking, you're going to get an assist.
Yes.
So yeah, it's a completely different game, but I'd had a few more points. Not maybe not a whole lot, just because that wasn't the one priority, shooting a lot of threes. They didn't do all the analytics that Coach Pope and his staff do now, to where they're trying to shoot X number of threes per game. But
Yeah,
we did with Scheidler and Clater. I mean, they all had range enough that they all would have had more points.
yeah, and who knows how many more points Pistol Pete would have had if there was a 3-point line. Like he was insane back whenever he
Yeah,
was.
he was way ahead of his time as far as the behind the back passes and those type of things, the entertainment of basketball. Yeah.
Pete Maravich for sure. How different was the game and lifestyle from going from college to the NBA though?
It's still basketball, but I think when you understand it's a business, I mean, and I say that because that was an adjustment for me late in a year. If they're maybe trying to trade a player, they're playing him a lot of minutes so other teams can see him. as opposed to playing a player because you want to win the game. I mean, they still want to win the game, but sometimes they'll give play. And I think a perfect example of that is in the NBA. You got to get your minutes to show what you can do. Reed Shepard's a perfect example. Every time he got minutes, he played exceptionally well. They sent him into the G League or D League, whatever they call it now, and had a great game right off the bat.
Yeah.
But he wasn't getting minutes just because the lineup the way it was made. So I'm really looking forward to seeing this year with the trade, and they got rid of a guard, so he should get a lot more minutes and be able to show what he can do. And as a Kentucky fan, we know what he can do. It's just a matter of getting those minutes to show it. So I think that, and probably the biggest adjustment is the number of games. The speed from every time you change level, the speed changes. You got to make that adjustment from, high school to college, college to pros, whatever. But the number of games in the pro ranks, at some point, you kind of hit a wall that first year just because you don't know. And so after that, you figure out even early in the season, when I get a chance to get my rest, I'm going to get my rest.
Yeah.
So you don't get, hit that wall later. But it's changed as well because now everything's charter planes. They got food for you on the plane after the game. You're at your next city that night sometimes. Whereas when I was playing, the rule was if you played, say we played Phoenix on a Friday night and had a Saturday afternoon or Saturday night game in Seattle, the rule was you had to be on the first available flight to your next location the next morning. So if the game's over at 10, takes you a while to unwind. You got to get some food in your system, and then unwind, get to sleep. But there's a lot of 6 o'clock a.m. flights heading out of Phoenix, and so then you got to get there that midday, which everybody doesn't realize. Going from Boston to New Jersey or New York to New Jersey, not very long. From Phoenix or any place to Seattle it's a half a day flight usually. And so you get in the afternoon, you got to get a nap before the game because you haven't slept much.
Yeah.
And that's why, a lot of times you look at the stats of back-to-back games. And does a team win a lot of their second games in back-to-back games, or is it a West Coast team maybe that has to do a lot of traveling and they're usually worn out? So once you understand that, though, I think you get used to it. And the other thing, too, if they didn't have first class, then you had to sit and coach. But it was a 3 seats for 2 players just because the 6'10" guy couldn't sit, in a real tight seat back then.
Yeah, I hear you, Ann. Yeah, I'm excited to see what Reed Shepherd can do this upcoming year in his second season. Of course, he's from London, Laurel County, so excited about that. Did they play 82 games still in the NBA whenever you were playing?
Yeah, regular season games. I think one year where we made it to the Western Conference Final before we lost to the Lakers, I think we went back and counted. I think I total with exhibition games and playoff games and everything. I played 110 games that year. So yeah.
Crazy.
And so then I go to Italy, when I stopped playing here, and I loved it over there because you play at the most 2 games a week. You play a league game on Sunday afternoon, and then if you're in a cup tournament, that's usually Wednesday.
Mhm.
So it's a lot of free time to sightsee, travel, or do whatever. So
Sounds like a blessing.
So yeah, no doubt. So you mentioned Reed Shepard. Maybe it could be him, but post career from Kentucky, like who is maybe one, two, three of the guys that like were your favorites to watch at UK? It could be Reed, could be some others, but just after you were gone from UK, who did you enjoy watching the most?
uh wow. I've been, we're coming up on the 50th year in a few more years anniversary. That's a lot of players going to this. I like players like Reed say that maybe, I mean, he's got a good first step and jumps well. Um, but players I can compare to that where I wasn't blessed with big size, big strength, didn't, have an outstanding 40 some inch vertical jump. So just understood and students of the game, fundamentally sound. If you get an open jump shot, a good percentage, you're going to knock it down. Didn't try to force things, tried to let the game, come to you, help my teammates get in the right situations as a point guard. And so, I mean, I enjoy watching each and every team just to see what the chemistry is and how things, you can kind of see what's going on behind the scenes as well. So, and as a broadcaster, that's some of the things I like about it. Not only the good seats sitting courtside most of the time until they do the satellite broadcast, uh, but just kind of going to practice, watching teams work and how the coach works them out and those type of things. Is to me that's fine. Nowadays, I think some of the broadcasting is turned into, well, I want to get this story told and this story told, predetermined before the game even is played, as opposed to actually talking about the game, what's going on during the game, and seeing those things.
Understood. And just talking a little bit more about your professional career, two questions I have for you. Who was the most underrated teammate you had while playing professionally? And then how was it like playing in Italy as well?
Uh, Underrated. Ian Dennis Johnson was really good. He's a guy that you hate to say this because you don't want young kids to hear it, but he hated to practice. But I tell you, every game he showed up. And in fact, one day he came to practice, and my coach at the time there in Phoenix was John McLeod from New Albany, Indiana. And he had a rule: if you were late, you paid $500, okay, for being late.
Mhm.
And so DJ came in like a minute late, was in the training room getting taped, and coach came off the floor to the training room and said, "DJ, you're late. That's going to be $500." So DJ said, "Well, if I'm already late and I've got to pay $500, I'm going to go home and get my rest." He didn't even practice. And so, but I tell you, when the game showed up, he was ready to go and, showed what he could do. I don't know about underrated because he did so well at Boston when they won a championship. Walter Davis was an outstanding player. We lost him a couple years ago too, unfortunately. Um, you know, I, Again, there's so many great players, top to bottom.
Yeah.
Um, it- it's it's really hard to believe the amount of money that players that aren't even playing, like the 12th man on the team, or the contracts they're sitting over there and just being big fans for. Some of them because they're 6'11" and not a troublemaker.
Yeah.
Some because of their potential. So I don't know. You like to follow, or I do, the players that work hard and try to give it their best, and then you hope they do have success.
Understood. And then just, talk a little bit about your playing time in Italy as well. I know you said you usually only played 2 games a week. How was that like?
It was great. I went over the first year, played in Bologna, and with the Virtus team, and my coach was Krezimir Čosić. I don't know if you remember that name. He played at BYU. He's from at the time Czechoslovakia. Played on their Olympic team, and he was 6'9" and played point guard. So he was before Magic Johnson, and he had a different take on the game, and it was working to perfection. They brought me in after the season had started, and I wasn't sure if I was going back to the NBA or whatever, so I signed, went over there. And the other guard was Roberto Brunamonte, who was on their national team, had been a professional since like 17, great player. And so we complemented each other very well and got on a roll. And so his system of it was a guard offense. And, we were shooting a lot of threes, and it was guys coming out setting picks for us, and then we could read what was going on. And so it was working. But then right before the playoffs, Roberto twisted his ankle. And so he was out for the entire playoffs, and so we didn't get as far as we had hoped.
Mhm.
Then the next year, I moved to Treviso, which is just outside of Venice. So Benetton was a sponsor, and had two real good teams there, and still keep in touch with a lot of those guys as well. So it's a great experience. At the time, it was probably the best basketball in Europe. I think maybe some of the other countries have improved, but they had some restrictions. You could only have two foreign players, which at the time was Americans, although Oscar was from Brazil and he was playing down in Caserta. Um, and so the fans loved it. It was like a college atmosphere. Arenas would be packed, maybe not as big arenas, maybe 10,000 was a sold out arena, but most games they were sold out. They were really into it from their chants and all the different stuff during the game, kind of like you see at soccer matches.
Mhm.
And so it was fun, and the people were great, real supportive, real friendly. Not as much English was being spoken back then, so that made it a little tough. But anytime you heard someone on the street speaking English, you were kind of like a magnet drawn right to them, just so you could talk to them for a little bit. But you learn enough Italian to get by, so it was fun.
Yeah, I have one last NBA question for you. So I was doing a little research, just trying to get prepared for this, and you participated in the first NBA three-point contest of all time. So you were in the first one. It was also won that year by a pretty decent player that I'd say most people have heard of, Larry Bird. What made you want to participate in that, as it was like debuting, and like what made you kind of want to be like, yeah, I want to join in on that right away?
Well, let me give you two stories. Number one, I think that year I was with Chicago, and I think I don't know if I made or took 104 three-point attempts, just to show you how much it was go inside. Okay. But I think what they did, they picked the top 10 or 9 or however many they had in the contest, percentage wise that year at the All-Star break, and invited them to come to the three-point contest, which, hey, if you get to go to the All-Star break, the game's going on. I wasn't playing in the game, but still got to enjoy the festivities.
Mhm.
And it wasn't what it is now. It wasn't a big deal. I didn't even practice for it because I didn't really know. They said, yeah, you'll get a minute to shoot. I didn't, and that reflected in the contest because I shot a pretty good percentage, but I wasn't shooting fast enough. I think I didn't even get to the last rack because I didn't know. I mean, it's the first time they'd ever had the contest. So I was catching it, shooting and watching to see if I made it and getting the next one. And I think of the 19 balls that I got in the air, I think I made 11, but I should have been shooting faster.
Yeah.
Funny thing of that story was um, you would go down to the locker room at halftime of the maybe the main game or even the rookie game. I don't even know if they had the rookie game back then. But as you would come in the door, although Bird never messed with me much, I guess because we were both from Indiana and mutual respect, whatever. Um, but as a player, say Leon Wood, who was one of the favorites, as they'd come into the door of the locker room and everybody's sitting around, he'd say, "Oh, yeah, there's third place. He'll miss his last four or whatever." And so he was rating each guy that came in the locker room where they were going to finish and that he was going to win it just because of his confidence. And so he tried to say just to maybe get in their head, obviously too. And as it turned out, Leon didn't have a very good contest. He did get a little tight, but he was one. I guess he understood it because I remember when he was with Philadelphia at the time, and when he came to Phoenix in warmups beforehand, players go out and shoot, loosen up before they go back in the locker room and ready to lay up line. That's all he shot, and he would be even up in the stands shooting threes, just getting his range and everything. But it's different when you get out there, and like I said, I wish I'd have known more about it
Yeah.
and actually practiced to know how long a minute was and how fast I had to get those shots up. So, but
What
I
did
don't, I don't
what
know if I'd have won it, but I at least would have gotten to the last rack.
what did Larry Bird place you at that time? I know you were saying that, one player was ranked third. What was he ranking
No,
you?
I didn't hear him. Of course, that never his talking never bothered me. I kind of ignore him anyway. I don't know if he even gave me a place or whatever. I didn't hear that when I walked in. So it was everybody else and was kind of laughing as somebody would come in, Sleepy Floyd, and he'd say, "Oh, he's going to finish
Yeah.
seventh," or.
Yeah, and I know you were previously talking about Denison Johnson. I forgot to mention though, but Denison Johnson was AI before AI because he was like AI is like we're talking about practice now, so
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
yeah.
but he before he got to Phoenix, he was in Seattle and was MVP of They won the championship that year. I think they beat the Kevin Greavy's Bullets the year before.
Mhm.
He got traded and Westfall went to Seattle.
Mhm. Yeah, and then getting outside of your playing career, now we're going to get into your coaching career. When you coached at Morehead State, what was the most rewarding part despite the challenges you had to face while coaching?
Well, when I got there, we basically built the program from scratch. And so just watching the being built, improving the level of talent, the success our players had, and being able to put that all together. I think that was the most rewarding to when you work with a player and you see him grow and become a better person as well as a basketball player. That's what's enjoyable, I think, from the coaching ranks. And we had success. I mean, we tied for the regular season championship one year, and probably would have won it. I had a player miss curfew and do some things he wasn't supposed to, so I sat him the last game when if we'd have won, we'd have been outright champs. But again, it goes back to you got to have discipline on your team. Um, I had an outstanding player that was drafted by Sacramento and made it right up to the last cut when he twisted an ankle, and so they did cut him. He played overseas for a long time. He was the all-time, still is, I think, the all-time leading scorer. And his cousin, who we recruited the year before, is the all-time assist leader. And so just watching it, and then even and knowing we did it the right way, weren't breaking rules to do those type of things, and then watching the success afterwards, because a lot of stuff we put in place from a new weight room that we raised money for to build, redid the gym, kind of made it more cosmetically pretty and better for the players. So you kind of feel part of that success as well. Um, there were some challenges, obviously. I like the recruiting, getting to know players and their parents and those type of things. But you know, Morehead was a little bit different. The school wanted to be separate from the city, which is unusual to me because it's a small town.
Yeah.
And even like they made us at the time put Morehead State on the jersey. It couldn't just be Morehead. It had to be Morehead State because they wanted that separation, which little things like that I never really understood. Um, and so then the expectations and things where we were basically supporting the athletic department because we had to play 5 guarantee games a year, which are basically guaranteed losses. That was disappointing. We had some close games, but never were able to knock off one of the big teams. And we'd play, I mean, if we're going to play guarantee games, we want to play name schools, just give our players a chance to compete against some of the best, see what they're trying to get to, hopefully, in their challenges. And but the thing is, if you take those over 9 years I was there, basically 5 games a year, that's 45 games we lost. That on my resume, if you flip those, it's okay. But leave them there, not understanding that those were basically losses you're going to take no matter what, then it doesn't look like I had a lot of success. But I'm real proud of the things we did get accomplished. To give you an example, we had the schedule finished. I'd already talked to the AD at the time, who, when I got there, was a running male for the Alumni Association, but they now worked his way to AD. Don't ask. And we'd already gone over the schedule, had it set, and it was one of the weeks off. I was here in Lexington, I think, playing golf. Got a call from him and said, "Hey, we're going to play Connecticut, who had just won the national championship. They were going to be #1 going into the season." And I said, "What are you talking about? We just finished the schedule." He says, "No, we're going to play them." And I said, "Okay, how much are they going to pay us?" And so he said, "Whatever." And I said, "When are we going to play them and where?" He said, "Well, we're going to go up there, and it's December 23rd." And I'm like, "In Connecticut on the 23rd, and Christmas, our kids aren't going to get any Christmas break." I said, "We've already got the schedule. We don't need to play them." He says, "Yeah, they're going to pay us this amount, and we're going to play them." He says, "But don't worry, I'll go with you." Like, that's going to make a difference.
Yeah.
So, you have to do it because I'm working for them. So we go up there and we score, they score, and we turn it over. And I think they scored the next 21. The game's over, basically. Well, while the game's going on, there's a big snowstorm. And so you have to fly out of Boston, I think. And so by the time the game finished, we shower, get to the airport. In the snowstorm, we missed the flight. Well, the AD had already left right after the game. He made his flight. He was home that night. And so my players don't get home till like 10:30 at night on the 24th. And then they're, wanting to go home for Christmas, so just stuff like that kind of over a 9 year period, I realized I'd kind of had enough, and they probably had enough of me as well. So moved on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What would you say it was something like while you were coaching that you had noticed just about the players that maybe it got on your nerves a little bit, but that was just much different from when you were playing, like something that maybe they would struggle with that you all didn't have a big issue with back when you were playing?
Um, for the most part, I didn't really have much trouble with the players, other than, a few of them being kids wanting to go out after curfew or whatever. I mean, they're college kids. They're trying to grow, learn about things. Um, but I think that's the thing. Even though we were a low Division I school with a low budget, I mean, we had to fundraise, have golf tournaments. I had, fortunately, some friends in country music that put on concerts that donated money to us. We had a zero budget for recruiting. So if we wanted to go out and see a kid, we had to fundraise. Um, but we ran it like a high Division I from my experience playing at Kentucky and the likes. So I think the kids appreciated that. We tried to travel in style and do the things. It wasn't like if we played poorly, we were going to eat at McDonald's. Nothing against McDonald's, but if we played well, we are going to eat at a steakhouse. So we tried to just run it like a top program and do what we had to do to make it a good experience for all the kids.
Yeah. And now getting more into your legacy and reflections right now, how important do you think it is for today's Kentucky players to connect with the program's tradition and former greats as well?
Um, I think as a former player, and I'm not the only one on this, I think you appreciate it as a former player when the current players maybe do understand. And that's one of the reasons I wrote this book, just so some of the younger generation has a feel of how Kentucky got the tradition and the history that got it to where it is today and how it's so well respected for basketball. And I mean, I remember when I was doing the radio, I did the post game interview, what Jack does, as a color analyst. That's what I was doing. And so I interviewed the player of the game. And there was a game, Antoine Walker was the player of the game, brought him out, interviewed him. We go to break and we're sitting there, and I knew he was from Chicago and I'd played there when I was playing. And so I said, "Hey, Chicago won tonight, beat so and so." He says, "Oh, yeah." He says, "You ever been to Chicago?" So, I mean, that kind of tipped me off that maybe they don't really understand the history of Kentucky. But I think, Coach Pope's trying to instill some of that. I sent him a note at Christmas. I thought, this book would be real good for his team. He keeps talking about, wanting them to understand what it means to the fans. And so hopefully he'll follow up on that this Christmas.
Yeah, I'll definitely reach out to him, see if if he's talking the book and mentioned it to the players during a press conference after a game or something. It
Yeah,
definitely.
that'd be great.
Yeah, one of my things that you mentioned that he's kind of instilling that and like making that a big priority of like how this place got to where it is. And one of the things that kind of stood out to me from year one, I don't know if you ever saw the social media team had put together a video for the Louisville game, and it was all of like past players writing a letter to the current players, just mentioning like what this game means to the state and all of these different things. So, like you highlighted it, that he really loves this place and thinks it's so special that he's trying to pour into these kids too.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that was, I think it was probably a surprise when he was hired as coach. A lot of people, his name really hadn't been mentioned, but I think that's a thing that you like is that you understand he knows what he's getting into because he's been in the program. He's firsthand seen it, done it, and whatever, so he can relate that to the players. And so it's not like maybe some of the coaches we've had previously where they got here and they had no idea what they were getting. It's not just coaching a basketball team, it's a whole lot of other stuff. And so he's got a real good grasp on that.
Yeah, and earlier this week, I don't know if you also saw the field of 68, but Mark Pope did mention it was either back in 2021 or 2022, but he almost accepted the Arizona job. And I'm thinking to myself, what would have happened if he went to Arizona? Would he actually still have come to Kentucky last year, or would he have stayed at Arizona?
I would say he probably would have made that transition, but
Take that transition.
there's something special about a Kentucky tradition and playing, and then also if you get an opportunity to coach here,
Yeah.
it'd be hard to turn down.
Yeah. Tommy Lloyd, though, he's doing great at Arizona for sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, he is. So going into the book, who is the one guy that you were most excited to interview? Maybe like dive more in depth on their career and everything. Who was the one that stood out going into it?
Yeah, I don't know if I went any deeper on anybody because it's just a great opportunity and a lot of fun. I mean, I enjoyed doing the book as much as probably people will enjoy reading, hopefully, because I had a great time just talking to players that, whether they were former players, I'd heard stories about some of the things that happened while they were here or leading up to here or even afterwards. And to be able to sit down one on one and ask them directly. Um, and then to go, for instance, we go to Dixon, Kentucky to interview Frank Ramsey before he passed. And, here's the guy that was known as the sixth man, the original sixth man. And I get there. I knew Tripp, obviously, but I didn't really know his dad that well. He'd come see Tripp every now and then. But to get there, and I mean, he couldn't have been more friendly. And he started spitting out some of my stats. And I'm thinking, this guy, I mean, you talk about intimidating. I was really nervous going into that interview, but he made me feel so at ease right from the start that, it turned out great. But I think every player, they have not only similarities between other players, the bond you kind of build out of it being a former Kentucky player, but also um, their own little quirks and things that they did. And so it's always fun to hear them tell that firsthand and not a third person telling that story. And I think that's what's special about the book, in that when you finish the book, just by reading each individual story, you get a feel of what is Kentucky history, of the basketball team or the tradition. So.
Yeah, and speaking a little bit more about the book From the Rafters Up Up, it's called. Was there a story that moved you the most whenever you were writing it, interviewing the players?
No, I mean they all have an effect on you. And one thing about the book, with each player, um, I wrote the introduction to the player and tried to tie it in with maybe that similarity thing that I'd experienced, or even the first time I'd met the player, or some story behind that to lead into that introduction. So that was always fun for me as well to kind of share that with everyone. Um, but everybody's got that story, and they're all different, but they're all have some similarities, which makes it that common bond.
Yeah. Was there a story you want in the book that you couldn't include?
Probably, but um, yeah, I mean, there was the player that probably stands out that was the funnest to interview just because there's so many stories about him. It was Kevin Greavy. And he always had a problem with curfew, it seemed like coming in late or whatever. Um, and I don't know. Yeah, there's a few that were pretty funny. Not because they're bad, they're just,
Yeah.
we
I,
got a couple in there. That was probably enough, but we could have gone on and on and on.
yeah, I hear you completely.
So, kind of as a reflection question, and then we'll slowly wrap this up. If you were to look back now and give one piece of advice to 18-year-old Kyle Macy, what would you say?
Um, you know, it's still going through a transition, but the NIL and the transfer portal. When I've talked to a few groups with this book, and the one thing I think to me that my concern is, and this was just me, it's not a movement or anything, but don't let this set you up for failure. And the fact that you're coming out of high school and they're giving you supposedly millions of dollars or a million, and you haven't done a thing. And when you get in the real world, if you don't make that money last, that's not going to happen. That's not how the real world works. You've got to perform, and if you don't, there's consequences. Here, they're giving you the money. You really haven't done anything. You've never stepped on a floor in a college game yet. And then, you know, if you don't perform or you get upset with the coach, transfer. It's okay. There's no consequences. I transferred, but I had to pay a consequence. I sat out a year. And so it's not really how the real world is. And so you worry that this system is kind of setting up the players that maybe aren't your top of the line players, kind of setting them up for failure that think it's that way in the real world when it's not.
Yeah, and I know in college football right now, two coaches got fired. I think it was Virginia Tech and then UCLA, and now players who haven't redshirted and they haven't played 4 games, they're able to sit out this year, still of course stay at their school and then transfer come the spring semester to a new school. And I'm thinking to myself, how is that fair? I get it, the coach got fired, but how's that fair for the player to also quit on the team as well?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm okay if there's some adjustments as far as okay, if you transfer once,
Yeah.
but now you do a broadcast, you've got 4 or 5 schools the kid's been at. You go through the list. He was here, he's here, he's here. You know, what happened to loyalty? And let's not kid ourselves when they say, "Oh, it's not pay for play." Uh, It's professional sports in college. The amateur sports basically is lost from what it used to be.
Yeah,
So.
you're right about that. And just reflecting a little bit more about your life, how do you hope people will remember you as a player, coach, and as a person as well?
I haven't thought a lot about that. I know I'm getting older, but I haven't thought a lot about that. But I think that they'll appreciate as a player the fact that I did try to do my best. I may not have been. I know I wasn't the most talented, wasn't as tall, as strong, as fast as all those things. But I worked hard and was a student of the game and tried to get every ounce of the ability that I was blessed with out and try to prepare for every game and do the best. And that's why, when people say, well, doesn't that crowd pressure bother you? It never did because there's no one that wanted to do any better as a player, the expectations any higher myself than me. And so they weren't going to have any higher expectations than I did. So if I played poorly, I knew I did. They didn't have to tell me that. And so it made me work harder to get ready for the next game and try to do better. So from a player standpoint, I think that's probably the thing. And the appreciation I had to the fan base of Kentucky when I transferred to, like I said, just take me in, get behind me, and the support that they've shown me all over the years. And that's why this tour is great because I'm now getting out back in the state, kind of my own little barnstorm tour, but pushing a book instead of playing basketball, but to get to see the same fans that are big Wildcat fans. So it's been fun.
Yeah, I'm definitely
Yeah,
get that book for sure.
Great.
yeah, I do have it actually. I already I already got it. So I'll be tuning in. But I do want to mention before we get off here. So I have a really good friend of mine. I was at their house last night, and I was talking to her mom, and she probably talked about Kyle Macy for an hour and a half. Like she is one of the biggest fans I've ever heard. So when you mentioned the crowd pressure, she was telling me stories of going to Freedom Hall, doing open practice, and just doing all she could to get like your autograph. And like you mentioned, you used to keep the score books and everything. She did that for your games while you were at Kentucky, and she was telling me all these stories last night. So I do want to just I know you said you haven't really reflected too much, but just the impact that you had on the state and me also. I know for us, you said that we're kind of the generation that you really want to speak to with this book. So I appreciate it a ton just to be able to reflect on stories that I've kind of heard, but
Yeah.
really get to kind of see what makes this place so special.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why I think people will like the book. You're talking about the game at Freedom Hall. We'd always play Notre Dame on New Year's Eve. And so Coach Hall would have an open practice, invite everybody that wanted to free, come in, and we get like 10,000 people just for a shoot around the morning of the game. And then afterwards, they'd set up tables all around the floor, and you could go to your favorite player and have him sign. And I know the one year, it was the '78 season. Um, Rick Roby, someone got up behind him and tried to clip a lock of his hair. And another player, there were so many people gathered around that the table collapsed. And so it was, and so they, called it a little short that year because it was almost getting out of control. But that just shows the love. And because those people, some of them couldn't get tickets to Rupp Arena at the time. And that's the only time they could firsthand and, face to face see a Wildcat player. So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, she mentioned a wild story about her and her friend had I think they had said that they were so like young and little at the time that they were trying to reach something out through and ended up falling over or something trying to get your autograph. She was telling me some story about it. So yeah, there's definitely wild Kentucky fan moments for sure.
yeah, but that's what makes it great. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and to just wrap up our podcast, what are you currently doing now, and then what are you planning on doing in the future? Of course, you've got your book signing going on, but let's talk about what you're currently doing.
Yeah, so this month I'll be traveling the state doing that. And in the spring, I coach high school tennis. This will be my 19th season at Lexington Christian Academy with the boys and girls teams. I still play. This weekend there's a tournament for us old men, 65 and over in Louisville, to try to win the state championship to advance to the sectional or regional, whatever they call it. So I like to get out there and still be competitive. And whether it's my high school team, get out there and hit with them, whatever. I still do a little bit of broadcasting during the college season. When COVID hit, it kind of slowed my schedule down. I enjoy doing that, but if for whatever reason, I don't really have an agent pushing me out there. So I stay active, try to do different things and enjoy watching the Cats play, whether I'm in Rupp. I don't get there very often during the season because as you get older, you don't really like cold weather. So I'm trying to spend a little more time down south where it's warmer.
Yeah, I understand completely. Well, if you do have some downtime during the basketball season, we would definitely love to get you onto the podcast again, just to talk about, the Kentucky basketball, their game, whoever they play against, or whatever. But we would definitely love to get you on more in the future.
But thanks. Appreciate the invite tonight and hope to see you again.
Do you have anything else you
Yeah.
want to add, Cameron?
Now go get the book. I'm so excited to dive into it. Yeah, go get the book for sure. I'm excited for it.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks. It's not only the stories, but also a lot of great pictures, and those majority of those pictures are from the players' archives or files, whatever that we stayed on top of them before, during the interview, and even after. Continue to send us pictures, because the more pictures you can send, the better it's going to turn out. And it's a real good. We like to call it a coffee table style book.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And where can people find the book if they can't go on this book tour at all?
Yeah, well, here in Lexington, we're going to be at McLeod's over on Southland Drive, McLeod's Coffee Shop, on September 28th, noon to 2. It's a Sunday after church. You can come by and get their copy.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, I'm all over the state the next few weeks. So, and that we happy to personalize it to you and sign it and whatever, take pictures and just I'm enjoying getting back out there and getting with the fans.
Yeah, I'm planning to be there as long as nothing changes. I'll hopefully be at that book signing, and I can't wait to meet you again in person. Of course, it was great meeting you a couple weeks ago at ABC 36, but thank you again for your time and getting onto this podcast, talking about your journey, your career, your life, and then, of course, your book.
All right, thanks a lot. Go Cats.
Thank you. Go Cats.
Thank you. Go Cats.